Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Mary Kate Eaton, Executive Director for Education at Providence. As a reminder, the information provided during this event is for information purposes only. If you have any medical questions, please reach out to your primary care or healthcare professional. Now let's begin. Joining me during this live event are Lynette Savage from University of Providence and Cindy Warburton from Providence Clinical Academy. We're excited to talk to you today about advanced practice nursing. So starting with Cindy, will you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role at Providence?
Sure. Thanks, Mary Kate. Well, I just started in this new role at the beginning of January. So I'm the program manager for the ARNP Fellowship program, which is a really exciting adventure that we're taking off. I'm very thankful that Providence is committed to this. It will take about 2.5 to 3 years to fully realize the whole fellowship program development and accreditation process. And so we're just starting down that journey, and there's going to be a lot more information coming out over the next year or so as that gets developed. And I will say it's certainly it's exciting that Providence has made a commitment to nurse practitioners and the practice and the success of their role in healthcare. And we're going to continue to see APRNs playing a vital role in our communities and health outcomes. And so to create a sustainable model for them as they get onboarded and transition out of school and into practice is something that is really important as a foundation. And it's great to be here to be a part of that.
Thanks so much, Cindy. Lynette, you are up next. Can you please tell us about your role at University of Providence?
Sure. Thank you so much, Mary Kate, for having both Cindy and I today. I really appreciate this opportunity to get in front of people and talk about it. So I work as a joint appointment from Providence. I've worked for them for 28 years, and my assignment is working with the University of Providence. And in the University of Providence, we have graduate programs in the Master's of Science in Nursing, and my role is the MSN Program Director. So I had the golden opportunity to help develop the AGNP, or the Adult Geriatric Nurse Practitioner concentration. So I kind of think of Cindy and I as partners. I'm on the let's get them into school, let's get them graduated, and let's get them to the point where they can take their national certification. And then we turn to Cindy and her crew, which has a great program to say, this would be, now that they've had their 2 years, they've passed their national boards, let's get them into that residency. So it's a really a good tag team event to help strengthen the programs and help strengthen our practitioners within Providence. So I am delighted to be here with you guys today.
Thanks, Lynette. So we all love our acronyms. Can you tell us a little bit what an AGNP does?
Yeah, on Monday, Tuesday, in totality, yes, what they do. So advanced practice nurse practitioner, in our case, an adult geriatric nurse practitioner, is one that has gone through one of two programs. In our program, our focus is on the nurse practitioner being in the primary care. There's also programs that would have the nurse practitioner being in a hospitalist type role. So the program that we have is developed is that an AGNP, once they've graduated and passed their boards and been through the delightful residency with Cindy and her folks, would actually be working in a physician's office or in a community practice, or they could actually be setting out their own office, hanging out their own shingle and seeing practitioners. For example, I'm very delighted in this first cohort we have 2 or 3 students that they come from different parts of the world, and they have wanted to open up their own healthcare practice for people of their tradition, of people of their language that do not have adequate health care in the current population. And so they want to become an adult geriatric nurse practitioner so they can open their own clinic and be seeing those patients. They are bilingual, so they can speak with those patients in their native language. So I am delighted that we have people in that. A daily event would be this practitioner would be seeing patients in the office, and they would be following them just as like an MD would do, be making diagnosis for them, figuring out treatments for them, looking for tests, and that they would be in practice with a group probably. So there could be some ability for them to be seeing patients in hospital, but more often they're going to be seeing them in the office. So that's pretty much the daily part for that job.
Thanks, Lynette, for that explanation. Cindy, can you tell us a little bit about the Clinical Academy in general and its need for the AGNP specialty model?
Sure. So the Clinical Academy has been around for a while now. They are well known for their solid RN fellowship program, and so they have this practice down. And now, as we start to develop the ARNP fellowship, it'll look very similar in that it'll focus on those core competencies. And so, as Lynette mentioned, there's a lot of different specialties that nurse practitioners can go into, even though the majority of the training programs out there may be for family nurse practitioners that range the entire lifespan. There's the adult and geriatric that specialize just on that population. But what happens is nurse practitioners, as they get out into practice, if they're not in primary care, many of them follow their own little passions, right? It may be in dermatology or cardiology or a hospitalist program. I work in urgent care as a nurse practitioner, and my background was ER, so it was easy to make that transition in there. And so the core of the fellowship program will probably not encompass all those specialty areas, but rather will have bolt-on support for those. But the accreditation process will focus on some really core fundamentals that nurse practitioners will require as they transition into practice. And that may look like how can they be leaders within their ARNP role? How can they lead quality initiatives or population health projects? Things like that are just integral to the work that they do. And so they need to be able to have a way to fine tune those skills at the same time, as we focus in on primary care initially, helping support them, building a panel of patients and managing the care of a population of patients and coordinating all of that. There's a lot to learn in the first year, and this program is really going to be designed to help support them in that.
That's super exciting, Cindy. I know we've gotten to hear a little bit about how the Clinical Academy supports patients and ministries. Can you talk a little bit about the specific support that they provide for those new nurse or transitioning in practice nurses?
Right. Well, so this program is still, new. We're still developing it. I can speak to how I envision it happening, and some of those specifics will be, just focusing in, like I was saying, how do you manage and coordinate your time to take on that panel of patients? That's usually one of the biggest things that new nurse practitioners transitioning in struggle with. They've had maybe a caseload of 5 to 10 patients at a time as they go through school. Well, now they are going to be managing that panel on their own. So it takes time to build it, takes time to fine tune those skills that allow you to interface with your patients and their family and all the complex dynamics that go into that. And so that's what that core program will focus in on as we onboard them.
Awesome. It sounds like you're really making sure your nurses are reliably prepared, inspired for their super challenging work, and making sure that mentoring support is there too. So that is great.
So, Mary Kate, if you don't mind, the connect the dots for me, and this is what I've just said to the students. So it's pretty excellent timing. They're in their second week right now, and we're talking about what are those things about being a nurse practitioner that they're kind of scared about, that they don't know or whatever. And it's those very things. They're writing about those very things that Cindy just mentioned. And so I've been able to say to them, well, guess what? You're learning about them now. They're learning about nurse practitioner competencies, because that's the heart and soul of who they're going to be. And I said, and some of these other things, such as leadership. How do you get a team moving forward? How do you make that transition from being a bedside nurse to being the primary independent licensed practitioner taking care of Mrs. Savage now? they're talking about they're scared that they won't know how to do that. And I said, well, you've got 2 years, and here are some of the classes you're going to take. You're going to take an organizational leadership class. You're going to take a social justice law and healthcare policy class. And you've got over 500 clinical hours where you're going to learn these skill sets, plus getting into the residency. Then they're going to take you one step further, because they're going to take you into here's the day-to-day. So it really is just this great transition from I'm giving them the theory and what it looks like. They're going to have a 2-year period, and they're going to have lots of clinical practicum. And then they're going to hopefully move into that residency where then they're going, okay, now we're going to talk about what day-to-day looks like. So it's really a great transition.
I love that you touched on the transition and the partnership there. And if you wouldn't mind, could you expand a little bit on how University of Providence partnered with Providence to create the AGNP program?
Absolutely. Dr. Deb Burton, years ago, it's a great story. She was at a meeting and learned back in 2007 that Providence had a university. And she kept going, we have a university? We can take students there? And so she started the RN to BSN, which was that transition. That's what they needed right then. They needed their nurses moving from an ADN to an RN to BSN, and that's what they created. So probably back in 2013 or 14, Deb went to the HR department and said, tell me where you're having the most struggle getting people hired. What are we missing? We're not getting them in because they haven't had the education for it. And one of the things was an adult geriatric nurse practitioner. So HR went back and said, where are those places that we're having issues with getting people hired and they need education? They came back to us at the university and said, these are the courses we need you to design the programs. The other place was in nurse educators. So in our MS program, we have 2 concentration. One's a nurse educator, and right now the second one is the adult geriatric nurse practitioner, based on the foundation that that's what Providence needed, because they needed more people in those roles. So actually, to me, that's the right way to be doing this. Is not, oh, it's Tuesday, let me see, what other degree should we add? It's working with partnership with Providence to understand, what does Providence need in the future for more employees? How do they need to be educated? And that's what we're doing. We're listening to Providence as our partner about what kind of classes and what kind of concentrations we develop.
And I know that nursing professions specifically are an industry-wide need. So it's a great service that the university is providing by educating more students. That's great.
Yeah.
So who would be an ideal student for the AGN program at the university? And maybe, I loved your real world experience. Maybe you have others that you might be able to share.
Yeah. This is the part that I love the most, is when we get to go and recruit students and then talk to them. So we do an interview with every student before they come into the program, because I start out by saying, okay, this is going to be a lot of homework. Do you guys remember that word homework? And they're kind of laughing, because for many people it's been, let's say 1 or 2 plus years since they've been in school. And so, their greatest fear is, how can I do all this? So we spend about 45 minutes talking about what it means to come in and do schooling in, and what it's going to mean to go do this. But one of the first questions I ask them is, so, kind of joking, so what do you want to be when you grow up? And they're like, I want to be I say, so tell me why you want to be a nurse practitioner. That's the most important thing. Because I've had people say, well, nurse practitioners work Monday through Friday. They have every weekend off. They have great hours. And I'm like, okay, so let's talk about what really happens when you graduate. I said, you may go into a practice and be kind of the new person in. So as a licensed independent practitioner, you may be taking call at a hospital. So I wouldn't say necessarily nurse practitioners just work Monday through Friday and every holiday and weekend off. So we talk a little bit about what reality means to it. What has impressed me so much, which each of the people in the students in this new cohort, was every one of them had a dedication to why they wanted to be there. My mom and dad didn't have health care when they needed it. My grandma needed health care and she couldn't get it in rural areas. And I want to be able to go back and work in a rural area when I graduate. Or, as I said, people have come and said, the people from my community where I grew up, they don't have any healthcare practitioners that speak their language. It's very hard for them to talk about healthcare needs. So I want to open my own practice. My heart just pulls, because isn't that exactly what we want from Providence, is to be able to support those families and support the practitioners? So part of it is, where did they think they wanted to go? And now that reality is starting to sink in about, oh my goodness, this is kind of harder than I thought. So we spend time supporting them in school with, we're going to take this 1 week at a time. Just take one chunk at a time, because that's how you're going to learn. And I'm hopeful in this 2-year process, as we go through with them, like Cindy says, we're new in the process. So I have visions and hopes as well, Cindy, is that we have taken these students along this path and give them that support they need, so they're taking one chunk at a time. So when they get to Cindy's program in the residency, they're like, okay, this was just like school. We're going to take this one chunk at a time, and I'm going to learn how to be that nurse practitioner. Because I say to them, this is so different than what you've been as a nurse. And a nurse, you've been at the bedside, or you've been on telemedicine, or you've been a case manager. And this is, you're now going to be responsible for these folks. You're going to have a panel of people that you care for. You're going to have to be thinking about them in different terms. So we spend a lot of time walking through that and talking about it with the students. So we're hopeful as they get to the residency, they'll be better prepared for this.
I love hearing about different folks' callings that draws them into the profession, and that just, it pulls at my heart too. I love to hear about it.
And definitely those people that would prefer to do family nurse practitioner, which is another great way to go, they have more access and see children. They could see them all the way from literally birth up in 12 or 13, and we're really focused on adolescent, adult, and geriatric. So I talked to them about it. I said, really, if you're interested in kids, then perhaps this isn't the program for you. You might want to look at an FNP. I want people to be in the right program. That's the number one thing. They get in there going, I didn't know this was only geriatrics. I'm like, okay, let's back the pony up here. All right, let's talk about this again. So I try in that opening interview to make sure that they recognize what population they're going to be dealing with, and that if they want something else, then let's help them get to that other program, because then they're going to be a better practitioner, better prepared.
What if I'm working full or part-time and I want to be part of the program? Is it a fit for me?
With a lot of prayer. No, yes, it does. So when I was in my PhD program, I could not have done it if I worked full time, then I went to school online. I also cared for one of my family members, and I had my own family. And I remember thinking sometimes things weren't always set up for somebody working full time. And I remember thinking in my PhD program, we have got to have a better way for this. Because as nurses, all of us are working. We don't get to take off and come back to school. We're working full time, and then we're trying to extend our knowledge. So we have designed all of these programs with an adult learner in mind, meaning they're asynchronous classes, so they get to pick when they're doing their time. They don't have to be in the classroom at a certain time. That also means that we can still have sessions with them in a collaborate, much like we're doing today, if they've got questions or we need extra work. But it's designed for, they work full time, so they fit school into what happens with their work and their family. Because I think it's going to make a better student if that part of it is working well. One of our students speaks fluent Spanish, and she works at a Spanish clinic that speaks only Spanish, and at home she speaks only Spanish. So if you can imagine, I can't imagine going to a school where I had to write papers in a different language. I mean, I can barely write papers, so how would I do that? So that's one of our differences, is that we are trying to promote that students coming in, we will help them with this. We will be there to be supportive. We've got a writing center. I'm available to them. We on the weekends, we have sessions about APA, which is one of their favorite words. Anybody will tell you that's written in a paper. But anyway, we're there to support them in this. So it's not just teaching them the concepts of being a nurse practitioner. It's also starting to build those skills they're going to need in other parts of their job.
Thank you so much, Lynette. That's good description. You've sold me on it.
Okay, good.
There you go.
Semester, Mary
I'll
Kate.
do more steps before I get there.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
So if someone is looking for more information on either the Clinical Academy or the University of Providence, where's the best place to go? Cindy, how about for the Clinical Academy?
Yeah, I can share the links to the Clinical Academy. That's probably the best place to start to find generalized information. Like I was saying, as we build this ARNP fellowship program out, there'll be more and more information that's outward facing to the rest of Providence that people can access and find more information about. But for now, just starting with that general link to the Clinical Academy would be a good start.
Very good. I see we have a scrolling link right now. So
oh, perfect.
Thank you to the magic in the background. Lynette, where's the best place to go to find more information about University of Providence's AGNP program?
So ours is the up.edu. That'll get you to the University of Providence site. So some folks do the www and then uprovidence.edu. Either one of them will get you there. You can also go in, if you work for Providence, we're also on our internal sites so that they can go in and pick it up and go that way as well. Or they can give me a call, and they can put my phone number up there, because I tell my students I am one phone call, one text, one email away, so that they've got questions, or are at nursing.uprovidence.edu. So we've got several ways that they can get to that.
Excellent.
Oh, look, there's my phone number.
Web is the way to go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you both, Lynette and Cindy, for joining us today, and to everyone for listening in. To learn more about the Providence Initiative's programs and services, ways to give, or if you're looking for help or medical advice, please visit providence.org. And if you're looking for specific information on the AGNP program or the Clinical Academy, you can visit the sites that Lynette and Cindy just mentioned. Also, make sure to follow us on social media at Providence on Twitter and at Providence Health System on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. So that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much again for joining us. And thank you to Cindy and Lynette.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much for having us, Mary Kate.
Yeah.